Hello, my name is Elowen, and this is the Christmas I learned how easily a woman can be erased. I was 9 months pregnant, sitting alone in our apartment when the entire city went dark. No power, no heat, no one with me. My husband had already left to celebrate Christmas with his parents because, as he said, he didn't want me there to ruin the mood. When I mentioned labor, he laughed and told me I could get to the hospital by myself. So I did. But one message I sent that night changed everything and revealed exactly who I was married to. Before we begin, tell me, what time are you listening to this, and where are you right now? Leave a comment and stay with me, because this story doesn't end the way you think. By late afternoon on December 24th, the apartment had settled into that strange holiday quiet that only shows up when something is missing. I was on the couch with my feet propped on a folded blanket, ankles swollen enough that my skin felt stretched tight. The tree lights were on, but I hadn't plugged them into the timer yet. I kept telling myself I would. I just hadn't gotten up. The baby clothes were stacked neatly on the coffee table, tiny onesies folded with more care than they probably needed. I ran my hand over my stomach, slow and absent-minded, feeling the weight of 9 months settle into my lower back. Christmas had always been simple to me. You showed up, even when it was awkward, even when it was inconvenient. You showed up because that's what family did. The kitchen clock clicked forward. Outside, traffic moved like any other winter evening. Nothing about the day felt dramatic. That was the strange part. My husband came out of the bedroom adjusting his jacket like he was headed to the grocery store. Calm, focused. He said my name the way you do when you think you're being reasonable. "So," he said, "I'm going to head to my parents' place soon." I nodded, waiting for the rest of the sentence. He leaned against the counter and crossed his arms. "It'll just be easier if I go alone this year." I laughed softly, not because it was funny, but because I honestly thought he was joking. "Alone?" He sighed, like I'd missed something obvious. "You know how they get. It's crowded, loud. With the baby coming any day now, it's probably better if you stay here." "Better." The word landed between us and stayed there. "For who?" I asked, still keeping my voice light. "For everyone," he said. "It's just practical." He spoke like this was a scheduling issue, like we were discussing traffic or weather. No raised voice, no anger, just a decision already made. I waited for him to ask how I felt. He didn't. I noticed the suitcase by the door then, not half-packed, not rushed, fully zipped, shoes tucked inside, charger looped neatly around the handle. He hadn't packed while we were talking. He'd packed before, sometime earlier, quietly. That was the moment I understood I hadn't been part of the decision at all. I was being updated. "I can manage one night," I said, more to myself than to him. He nodded quickly, relieved. "Exactly. That's what I figured." He hesitated, then added, "You've been tired lately, emotional. I just don't want things to get tense over there." Tense, emotional. I knew what he meant. "You think I'd ruin the mood," I said. He didn't deny it. He shrugged, like this was common sense. "It's Christmas. Let's not make it harder than it needs to be." The words stung, but what hurt more was how casually he said them. No cruelty, no apology. Just a quiet exclusion dressed up as concern. I didn't argue. I wish I could say I stood up for myself right then. The truth is, I didn't. I'd spent years smoothing things over, telling myself every family had its rhythms, its unspoken rules. I told myself I could handle being alone for one evening. I told myself I'd been strong before. I helped him carry the suitcase to the door. He kissed my cheek, quick and distracted, and said he'd call later. The door closed behind him with a soft click. The apartment felt bigger after that, emptier. I lowered myself back onto the couch, careful, one hand braced on my stomach, the other resting on the stack of baby clothes. I didn't know yet that this wouldn't be a quiet holiday. I didn't know that this was the beginning of everything shifting in ways I couldn't undo. I told myself it was only one night, and that nothing serious ever happens on Christmas Eve. I turned off the tree lights a little after 5. They were too cheerful for how quiet the apartment felt. Outside the window, the sky had faded into that deep blue that comes just before full dark. You could still make out shapes, cars parked along the curb, a man walking a dog bundled in a little red jacket, but the streetlights hadn't clicked on yet. For a while, I just sat there, no TV, no music, just the ticking of the thermostat and the occasional distant horn. There was something soothing about pretending I didn't mind. I got up slowly, cradling my belly with one hand, while I filled a glass of water with the other. The linoleum in the kitchen was cold through my socks. I made a mental note to grab the extra heater for the baby's room, then remembered he had taken it with him last week, said it made more sense to keep it at his parents' house since they were hosting dinner. The water tasted metallic. I stood there a moment, rubbing the spot on my back where the ache never fully went away anymore. Then I went to the window. From 7 floors up, the city looked alive. Windows blinking in apartment buildings across the street, someone laughing from a balcony, music leaking faintly through a cracked-open window below. The holidays were still happening for someone. A sharp pressure dropped low in my stomach. Nothing serious, just one of those long, slow waves I'd been feeling more often lately. I placed a hand there, waited it out. It passed. I breathed, told myself everything was fine. And then the lights went out, all at once. No flicker, no warning, just darkness. The apartment dropped into silence, like a door had slammed shut on the world. The fridge stopped humming, the heater cut, the small, ordinary hum of a home. Gone. I froze, heart suddenly louder than anything else around me. I reached for my phone, tapping the screen for light. The brightness stung. I checked the hallway first. Total black. Then the windows. Every building across the street was dark too. It wasn't just my apartment. It wasn't even just this block. The entire grid was down. I didn't panic. Not yet. I'd lived through outages before. Storms, overloaded transformers, old wiring. But this felt different. The cold was already creeping in. I could feel it through the draft near the window pane. I sat back down and pulled a blanket over my legs. I dialed him. The screen lit his name, Jason, work and home. I let it ring longer than usual. He answered on the 5th ring. "Hey, what's up?" His voice was upbeat, like he'd had wine, maybe 2 glasses. "There's a blackout," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Everything just cut off a few minutes ago. It's not just here, it's the whole street." "Really?" he said, like I'd just told him we were out of milk. "Didn't notice anything here. All good on this end." I waited. He didn't ask if I was okay. "I just wanted to let you know. It's getting cold and well, being this far along, I thought I should check in." Yeah, good call," he said, then laughed, soft, careless. "Hey, if labor kicks in, just grab an Uber or something." I didn't respond. "You're tough," he added quickly. "You always figure things out. Honestly, it might even be better. Less chaos without my mom fussing." I let the silence stretch. He didn't notice. "I should get back in there," he said. "Dinner's almost ready. Probably just a power hiccup, right?" "Sure," I said quietly. "Just a hiccup." When the call ended, I stared at the phone in my lap, the screen slowly dimming until it disappeared. I didn't cry. Something in me had gone still, like a wire finally snapping after years of slow tension. I stared out the window, no longer seeing the city, just the reflection of myself in the glass. Alone, wrapped in a blanket, one hand over a life I'd carried for months, while the person who was supposed to carry it with me made jokes over dinner. It hit me then, not the power outage, not the cold, but the way he'd laughed, the way my safety had been reduced to a punchline. It was never really about Christmas. It was about what people think they can get away with when they wrap it in holiday politeness. I pulled the blanket tighter. My phone buzzed once with a text from Jason. "Hang in there. You got this. Love ya." I read it twice, not because it meant something, but because it didn't. The heater wasn't coming back on. I told myself, one last time, that he didn't mean it badly, that it was just bad timing, that maybe he didn't realize how it sounded, that maybe he was tired too. But the truth was simpler. He'd always known I could survive alone. He just never asked if I should have to. I didn't know then that the darkness wouldn't just stay outside. It would settle inside me too. I sat for a long time without moving, wrapped in the quiet like it was something I could wear. The lights had been out for maybe 2 hours by then, maybe more. I'd stopped checking. The phone screen was the only glow in the room, and I was using it sparingly now. At 43%, the battery felt like a fragile lifeline. The heat had dropped noticeably. I'd pulled on Jason's old sweatshirt, not for the warmth so much as for something to hold on to. The sleeves still smelled faintly like his cologne. I hated that it comforted me. Outside, the city had quieted down, the kind of stillness you don't normally hear in an apartment building. No televisions humming through the walls, no hallway doors slamming, not even the sound of a neighbor's music. Just the occasional siren far off in the distance, echoing like it didn't belong in this world. I leaned back into the couch cushions, shifting carefully. My stomach was stretched so tight, it felt like I was carrying the weight of everything. Not just the baby, but all the years leading up to now. I pressed a hand gently over the place she usually kicked, hoping for some small movement. Nothing. Just a soft, low ache and the growing chill in the air. It's strange how quiet lets your mind wander. Not forward, but back. I found myself remembering things I hadn't thought about in years. Not the big betrayals, not the dramatic heartbreaks. Those are easy to spot, easy to wrap a label around. No, what came up were the ordinary moments. The slow, steady drip of letdowns that never made headlines. I remembered my 12th birthday. The cake Mom bought from the corner bakery had the wrong name spelled in frosting. She didn't notice. I didn't correct her. I remembered prom, how I waited on the front steps in a borrowed dress, while my date texted that he wasn't sure he could make it. He never showed. I told everyone I didn't feel like going. I remembered the first time Jason missed an ultrasound, how I told the nurse he had a work meeting, even though he never texted back that day. I'd already started covering for him before I realized I was doing it. Little things. Tiny, barely there cracks. Until one day, you look down and realize you're standing on a floor made entirely of them. That night, in the quiet of our darkened apartment, I realized something I hadn't wanted to name. I hadn't just been unlucky. I'd been trained, conditioned. Somewhere along the line, I learned how to handle being disappointed. I got good at it, reliable, resilient. The kind of woman people count on when they don't want to show up themselves. And it wasn't just Jason. It was every teacher who said, "You're strong, you'll be fine." Every friend who forgot to call back. Every boyfriend who disappeared when things got serious. Every time I told myself it was okay to carry it all. I taught people I didn't need them, and they listened. The room felt colder now. I unfolded the extra blanket from the arm of the couch and tucked it over my legs. The edges were frayed, but it was thick. I should have replaced it years ago, but there was always something else. Groceries, rent, car repairs, things I handled without asking. I shifted my weight, trying to find a better position. That's when I felt it. A low, dull pressure in my lower back. Not painful exactly, but different. It made me pause. I breathed in slowly, held it, then exhaled, waited. It passed. I didn't panic, not yet. Pregnant women get these late in the third trimester. Braxton Hicks. Practice contractions. Normal. But I couldn't ignore the way my body tensed in response. The way my muscles remembered something my mind hadn't caught up to. 15 minutes passed. Then it came again. Stronger this time, lower. It rolled through me like a wave, and when it passed, I felt emptier somehow, like something had shifted. I sat up straighter and reached for my phone. 39% battery. I checked the time, 10:42 p.m. The blackout was still in effect. No updates online, no service alerts. I checked the weather. It was 26 degrees outside and dropping. I opened the Notes app and typed, "First real pain, 10:42 p.m." I didn't know why I did that, just something to track it. Something to mark the moment in case I needed to remember. I thought about calling him again. Jason. I thought about texting instead. Just a heads up. But I didn't. I couldn't bring myself to hand him another opportunity to laugh. Instead, I leaned back into the couch and closed my eyes. Just for a second. I told myself I'd wait and see. 1 more hour. That's what I gave myself. If it happened again, I'd decide then. I wasn't scared. Not yet. But I could feel something inside me shifting, like a slow current turning direction. A voice that had been quiet for too long starting to speak again. I was still telling myself I could handle it, even as my body began to tell a different story. By midnight, I stopped thinking in hours. The clock on my phone still read 12:07 a.m., but I wasn't counting time that way anymore. Instead, I tracked it in waves. Those low, tight pulls in my back that came and went like the tide, each one arriving a little sharper, a little more certain. The apartment had grown colder. I could see my breath faintly when I exhaled. The only warmth left was what I'd managed to gather under 2 mismatched blankets, my knees pulled up, belly heavy between them. I shifted carefully, slowly, the same way you move when you're afraid of knocking something loose inside you. The dark no longer felt passive. It felt deliberate, like the world had gone quiet on purpose. The silence had a texture now, dense, thick, heavy enough that it pressed against my ears. I tried grounding myself in what I could control. Small things. I sat up straighter. I sipped cold water, letting it move slow down my throat. I counted the breaths between each contraction, if that's what they were. I wasn't ready to call them that yet. Not out loud. I looked toward the hospital bag again. It sat near the door, zipped and waiting. I'd packed it weeks ago, back when hope still came easily, back when I believed he'd be beside me for this part. That bag had become the symbol of what I was preparing for, but now it just looked like a reminder that I might be doing this alone. At 12:34 a.m., another one came. This one didn't just tighten, it pressed. A deep, low ache that made me pause mid-breath. I closed my eyes, trying not to wince, just letting it move through me. I could have kept pretending, but I knew. These weren't just random aches. They had a rhythm now, a pattern. My body was telling me what I hadn't wanted to admit. I might be going into labor. I pulled the phone off the coffee table, the screen lighting up the dark. 28% battery. I stared at his name in my call log, Jason. I hadn't planned to call again. I really hadn't. But something inside me still wanted to believe that if I said it clearly enough, he'd hear it this time. Maybe I hadn't been specific before. Maybe I should have said the word labor instead of hinting. I pressed the call button. It rang once, twice, 3 times. I counted each ring like heartbeats. 4, 5, 6. Voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I didn't have the energy to pretend anymore. I just stared at the screen for a moment longer than I should have, thumb hovering over his name like maybe I'd press it again. But I didn't. I didn't need to. That silence, that was my answer. He wasn't coming, not now, maybe not ever. And it wasn't because he didn't know, it was because he didn't care enough to ask. The pain of that wasn't sharp, it didn't stab, it just settled. Like fog, thick and familiar. I lowered the phone, placed its screen down on the couch beside me, and let the weight of that understanding roll over me. Not just the silence tonight, but all the silences before it. All the moments when I had to tell myself, he's tired, he forgot, he means well. The truth was, I'd been waiting for permission to matter. Waiting for someone to say, you're right, this is hard, you shouldn't be alone. Waiting to be chosen, prioritized, protected. And now, in the middle of this cold, powerless night, with my body clenching tighter every 20 minutes, I finally saw it for what it was. Help withheld is still a choice. He wasn't too busy. He wasn't too distracted. He just chose not to be here. And I'd been choosing to wait. I stared into the dark, my hand resting on my belly as another wave began to rise, low and steady. I breathed through it, one slow count at a time. When it passed, I didn't reach for the phone. I didn't whisper his name. I didn't ask, should I call someone else? Or, should I go now? I stopped asking altogether. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I stopped waiting for someone to validate what I was feeling. I didn't need permission anymore. That was the moment I realized I wasn't waiting anymore. I was deciding. The decision didn't roar. It arrived quietly, like breath warming a cold window. Once it was there, it didn't leave. It just settled, calm, grounded, immovable. I slid the blankets aside and sat up, slow and careful. My back pulsed again, low and steady, like a drumbeat beneath the skin. I didn't flinch this time. I just acknowledged it. I whispered to the dark, okay. I moved by memory. The flashlight app stayed off to save battery, so I let my hands guide me, over the arm of the couch, toward the wall, along the edge of the entry table. Coat first, then scarf, boots. The hospital bag handle felt cold in my palm, heavier than I remembered. I didn't rush. I didn't need to. I wasn't panicking. This wasn't a moment to run. It was a moment to walk with intention. Locking the apartment door behind me felt final. I didn't double-check it like I used to. I just turned the key, pocketed it, and faced the hallway. It was dark, not just dim, pitch black. The kind of dark that absorbs sound, that makes your breath sound too loud in your own ears. I reached out and touched the wall with one hand, dragging it along the peeling paint as I moved forward. The elevator was out, obviously. I took the stairs, each step deliberate, one hand braced on the rail, the other cradling the underside of my belly. Every few landings I paused, not from fear, just to breathe, deep, grounding. Outside, the city looked unfamiliar, not dead, not abandoned, just different, like a stage set between scenes. Buildings outlined by distant emergency lights, streets washed in blue-red flashes from far-off sirens. The blackout painted everything in stillness. My car was parked down the block, and I made my way to it with the slow confidence of someone who knows what must be done. I didn't check over my shoulder. I didn't expect help to come running out of the shadows. The cold pressed through my coat like it had purpose. I focused on each step, boots crunching faintly over ice-dusted concrete. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once, then nothing. Sliding into the driver's seat, I exhaled for the first time in minutes. My breath fogged the windshield. I started the engine, the dashboard lighting up in soft amber. Heat would take time. Everything took time tonight. I adjusted the rearview mirror out of habit, then stilled. The reflection wasn't just my face. It was my face in this moment. Focused, steady. A little pale, maybe, but ready. The contractions weren't close yet. I knew that. I'd read enough. Watched enough. Still, they were no longer passing discomfort. They had rhythm, weight, meaning. I drove carefully. The blackout made the streets feel wide and uncertain. Streetlights blinked off like ghost memories, traffic signals limp. I paused at every intersection, even when I didn't have to. Every red light that wasn't working still made me stop. Hospitals don't sleep. That's something I'd always known in theory. But as I pulled into the emergency entrance, that truth felt sacred. Backup generators hummed like quiet giants. The automatic doors stood ready, glowing gently under battery-powered lights. I didn't get out immediately. I sat there, engine running, hand resting over the rise of my stomach. One more contraction came and went. I counted silently, my breath the only sound inside the car. This was it. This moment, right here, it changed things. I could feel it in my chest. It wasn't just that I was about to have a baby, it was that I was here, without anyone telling me it was time, without asking for permission. I had waited for a partner, for support, for someone to say, "We're in this together." But I came anyway. I turned off the engine, grabbed the bag, stepped out into the cold without hesitation. And I didn't call him. I didn't think about how he'd feel or what excuse he might offer later. I didn't try to explain why I hadn't waited, because I didn't owe him a report, not anymore. I pushed through the sliding glass doors alone. The air inside was warmer, buzzing slightly with artificial heat. A nurse at the triage desk looked up, startled but calm. I nodded, not trusting my voice yet. She stood. "Are you in labor?" I nodded again, this time more certain. "I think so." She smiled, that practiced professional smile, and stepped out from behind the desk. "Let's get you checked in." I followed her without looking back. My legs felt solid beneath me. Tired, yes, but strong. There was a part of me, a very old, quiet part, that wanted to cry right then. Not out of fear or pain, but grief. For what this moment could have been, for the hand I should have been holding, for the whispered encouragement I would never hear. But I didn't cry. I acknowledged the ache, tucked it gently in the back of my heart, and kept moving. Because this was my moment now. I didn't know yet that walking into that hospital alone would be the last quiet moment I'd have for a long time. The quiet didn't disappear all at once. It thinned out, replaced by movement and soft instructions, the squeak of shoes against tile. The hospital carried its own rhythm, steady and practiced, as if it had learned long ago how to function when the rest of the world stalled. A nurse walked me down a short hallway lit by generator-powered lights. The glow was flatter than normal, but dependable. I noticed small things the way I always do when I'm trying to stay calm. A coffee cup left on a counter, a clipboard hooked to a door, the low hum that never quite faded. No one rushed me, no one hovered. They spoke clearly, simply, like people who do this every night and expect the rest of us to catch up. "Go ahead and have a seat," the intake nurse said, pointing to a chair. "We'll get some information first." I lowered myself carefully, one hand braced against the wall. The chair was firm, practical, the kind meant for waiting, not resting. She smiled, professional but kind. "Who's here with you tonight?" The question landed softly, but it stayed. "No one," I said. My voice didn't shake. I didn't explain. I didn't add a reason that made it sound temporary or unfortunate. It was just a fact. She nodded, already writing, as if this were something she heard every day. Maybe it was. Another nurse stepped in with a blood pressure cuff. Someone else asked for my ID. The process moved forward without hesitation, which somehow made it heavier. There was no pause where someone suggested I call my husband. No raised eyebrow, no pity. They accepted my answer, and that meant I had to accept it too. Eventually, I was guided into a small triage room. curtains instead of walls, a bed covered in paper, a tray with neatly stacked forms waiting at the foot. The nurse set the clipboard in front of me. Just need a few signatures. The room felt quieter than it had a moment ago. Not empty, focused. I scanned the first page. Name, date of birth, insurance, routine questions. My pen moved steadily across the paper, muscle memory taking over. Then I reached the line that slowed me down. Emergency contact. The blank space seemed larger than the others, louder. I stared at it longer than I meant to, my hand resting flat on the page. There was a familiar urge to minimize, to think, it's fine, I'll fill it in later, or someone will show up eventually. But this wasn't a maybe situation, this was now. I left it blank. The nurse didn't comment when she took the clipboard back. She flipped through, checked the signatures, nodded once. All set. That was it. No discussion, no follow-up questions. As she stepped out, something in my chest tightened, not with anger, but with a tired kind of sadness. Not for myself exactly, for the version of this night that should have existed, for the chair beside me that stayed empty. I didn't cry, I didn't feel dramatic, I just felt the weight of it settle, the way truth does when you stop arguing with it. Lying back on the bed, I listened to the steady beep of a monitor being set up. I focused on breathing through the next contraction, slow and even, the way I'd practiced. This part, at least, I knew how to do. It struck me then that I had already crossed a line I couldn't step back over. I hadn't waited for reassurance. I hadn't asked if it was okay to come in. I hadn't checked whether this was inconvenient or poorly timed. I showed up. I signed the papers. I took responsibility. Whatever came next would happen on my terms, even if they weren't the terms I'd imagined. I rested my hands on my stomach and closed my eyes, letting the hum of the generators fill the space where doubt usually lived. That was when my phone finally lit up, and everything changed. My phone buzzed again, then again, vibrating against the thin mattress like it had something urgent to confess. I picked it up and saw the screen crowded with missed calls. His name stacked on itself. Messages arriving out of order. Timestamps close enough to feel frantic. A few hours earlier, silence had been his answer. Now there was too much sound. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel vindicated. What I felt was distance, the kind that settles in once you've already stepped somewhere new. I scrolled slowly, reading without urgency. Apologies tangled with explanations. Questions piled on top of each other. Where are you? Why didn't you call me? I just saw my phone. Are you okay? The words were familiar, not because they were sincere, but because they came late. I'd learned to recognize that tone over the years, concern that only appeared once the consequences were unavoidable. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I typed one message, short, clear, impossible to misunderstand. I'm at the hospital. I'm being admitted. No extra details, no emotion, no invitation to debate. I sent it, then set the phone face down on the bed. For a moment, nothing happened. The room hummed softly, machines doing their steady work. A nurse passed by the curtain, her footsteps unhurried. Somewhere down the hall, a baby cried, thin and sharp, then quieted. Then my phone exploded with movement. Calls came one after another, barely stopping long enough for voicemail to kick in. Messages stacked fast, the tone shifting with each one. Panic bled through the screen. Why didn't you tell me? I'm on my way. I didn't know it was like this. Please answer. I watched it all the way you watch weather from inside, a storm you can see clearly now that you're not standing in it. What struck me most was how quickly his fear had arrived once control slipped from his hands. Not when I said I was alone, not when the city went dark, not when I told him something was happening. Only now, only when I'd acted without him. The nurse returned to check the monitor. She adjusted a setting, asked how I was feeling. I answered honestly, calm, focused, present. When she left, I turned the phone back over. It buzzed immediately, like it had been holding its breath. I didn't pick it up. For years, I'd been trained to respond quickly, to smooth things over, to make sure he wasn't uncomfortable, worried, inconvenienced. I'd learned how to manage his emotions before I ever learned how to protect my own. That reflex stirred, then settled. I wasn't being cruel. I wasn't punishing him. I was simply not interrupting what needed my attention. Another message came in. I'm scared. I read it once, then again. It wasn't the fear that moved me. It was the timing. Now he needed reassurance. Now he wanted connection. Now he wanted to know I was safe. I thought about all the moments I'd swallowed my own concern, so he wouldn't feel guilty. All the times I'd minimized my needs, so he wouldn't feel pressured. The late nights, the quiet decisions, the steady way I'd carried things alone because it was easier than asking twice. I typed, then erased, typed again, paused. Finally, I sent one more message. I'm okay. Focus on getting here safely. That was all. I set the phone down again and leaned back, closing my eyes as another contraction rolled through. I breathed through it the way I'd been taught, slow and deliberate, staying with my body instead of drifting into old patterns. Power shifts don't feel like victory. They feel like loss, not of control, but of illusion. The illusion that someone will show up the way you need if you just explain yourself better. The illusion that patience guarantees care. Letting go of that hurt more than I expected. When I opened my eyes, the room looked the same. The lights still hummed. The curtains still hung slightly crooked. But something inside me had settled into place, firm and unmoving. I wasn't waiting to be chosen anymore. I was choosing myself. My phone buzzed one last time. A single message, steadier than the rest. I'm almost there. I didn't respond. By the time he reached the hospital, I already knew what I was going to say. I'd been moved to a private room, small, white, too bright. The nurse had helped me settle in, hooked up a few monitors, then left me alone with my thoughts and the slow beep of reassurance from the machines. The door remained half open, letting in a sliver of the fluorescent hallway light. I heard his footsteps before I saw him, quick, uneven, hesitant, then speeding up. The sound of rubber soles on hospital tile, familiar yet foreign. When he finally turned the corner and came into view, I didn't stand. I didn't smile. I just watched him take in the scene, me sitting upright in the hospital bed, the monitors clicking gently behind me, my hands resting calmly on top of the thin blanket. He looked pale, sleep-deprived, hair uncombed, jaw clenched like he'd been biting back regret the entire drive. But for the first time, I didn't scan his face to adjust my own emotions. I didn't ask myself if he was mad, scared, embarrassed. I just looked at him the way you look at someone you've stopped chasing. He opened his mouth too quickly. The words fell out before he had a chance to measure them. I didn't know it was this bad. Elowen, I swear. If I'd known, I would have... I didn't say a word. I was asleep, okay? I left my phone on the nightstand. I didn't mean... His hands moved while he talked, fidgeting with the hem of his coat, like the truth was hiding in the threads. The power was out. I thought you'd be fine. I didn't know. He paused, waiting for me to interrupt. I didn't. The silence made him nervous. He was used to me filling in the blanks, easing him back to comfort. You could have called me again. Why didn't you call again? Still, I said nothing. He sat down in the visitor chair at the foot of the bed, cleared his throat, tried again. I'm here now. That's what matters, right? I looked at him, steady and even. Then I said it, clearly, calmly. You said I could get to the hospital by myself. He blinked. You said that. There was no venom in my voice, no accusation. Just the truth, echoing back at him louder than anything he'd said. "I remember," he muttered. "I didn't mean it like that." "But you did say it," I replied. "And that's not just about last night. That's how it's been." He opened his mouth again, but I held up my hand, soft, firm, enough to make him stop. "I've done so much alone, not just tonight, not just this pregnancy, everything. I carried the weight, and you let me. And now, the moment I stopped asking you to hold it with me, now you panic." He stared at the floor. "You're right," he whispered. I waited. Not for more excuses, not for an apology. Just to see if he understood. "I didn't think you'd actually go alone," he added. "I figured you'd wait, like you always do." That landed harder than he intended. I stopped waiting. He rubbed his face, leaned back, and let out a shaky breath. "What do you want from me?" I looked at him long enough for the words to land. "I don't want anything from you." His eyes snapped up. "So that's it? You're shutting me out?" "No." I shook my head slowly. "I'm drawing a line, a real one. One that doesn't move every time you're uncomfortable." He tried to laugh, nervous, dry. "Come on, Elle. Don't do this now." "This is the only time I could do this," I said, "because if I didn't say it now, I'd fall back into it all over again." He stood up, restless, walked a few steps toward the door, then back. "So what? You don't forgive me?" "I'm not asking for an apology," I said, "and I'm not here to punish you." "Then what are you doing?" "I'm telling you what won't happen anymore." He froze. "I won't beg for you to show up. I won't explain the difference between care and convenience, and I won't confuse your guilt with love." He looked like he wanted to argue, but the words didn't come. I didn't need him to agree. That was the point. The silence stretched between us. Not cold, just final. I turned my gaze to the window. It was still dark outside, the kind of darkness that settles just before dawn, when the world holds its breath. "I didn't raise my voice," I said softly, "because I don't need to." He sat down again, slower this time, smaller. "I didn't expect this," he mumbled. "I know." Neither of us spoke for a while. The monitor behind me kept its rhythm. My body reminded me, gently, that it was still preparing for what was coming. Finally, he asked, "What do you want now?" And that was the moment I realized I finally knew the answer. I didn't answer him right away. I just looked at him, steady and unshaken, and let the weight of the silence settle between us like fresh snow. He shifted in the chair beside my hospital bed, clearly expecting me to say something, anything, that would help him make sense of what this moment meant. But for the first time, I didn't feel the need to rescue him from discomfort. All my life, I'd been trained to soften things, to cushion hard truths with softer edges. Wanting something, especially for myself, always came with conditions. Was it fair? Was it too much? Would someone else be hurt by me having it? But not now. Now the answer to his question came without fear, without second-guessing, without guilt. What did I want? "I want peace," I said simply. "And I want to stop making myself small to keep things from falling apart." His lips parted, as if to argue, but he didn't speak. Maybe he saw it on my face. This wasn't a threat. It wasn't a fight. It was just real. "I'm not asking you to promise anything," I added. "I'm not giving you a list of changes you need to make. I'm telling you where my line is." I felt no anger as I said it. No heat behind my voice, just a clarity that didn't waver. "I won't explain again why showing up matters. I won't remind you of things you should have known. I won't pretend indifference is love just because it's all that's being offered." His shoulders sagged. A kind of slow deflation. Like he finally understood this wasn't about whether he would be forgiven. It was about whether I would keep allowing myself to be erased, whether he changed or not. That wasn't mine to manage anymore. And I could see it hit him, not all at once, but gradually. The realization that this wasn't about me being mad or dramatic or emotional. This was different. This was done. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. He wasn't a villain in a movie. I wasn't here for a takedown. I was here to make peace with myself. And for the first time in years, that was enough. He sat back down, quieter now. His hands folded in his lap like a schoolboy waiting for a consequence that wouldn't come in the form he expected. The nurse knocked softly and poked her head in. "Just checking on you, sweetheart. Merry Christmas." I managed a smile. "Thank you." The door clicked shut again, and for a moment the room was still. Outside, the hallway buzzed with soft activity, footsteps, muffled voices, wheels rolling down linoleum. But inside, it was just the two of us, sitting in the kind of silence that comes only after truth has been spoken. It was a quiet Christmas morning. No tree, no presents, no carols or cinnamon smells. Just the clean, humming quiet of fluorescent light and heart monitors, and the kind of stillness that feels like the beginning of something rather than the end. I glanced out the small window beside my bed. Snow had started to fall again, gentle, almost shy. It blanketed the parking lot, the sidewalks, the roof of his car. No one would be sledding or laughing or unwrapping anything this morning. Not here. But that quiet, that clean break, it was a gift. One I hadn't asked for but needed more than anything. And then, the words that had been circling inside me all morning found their place. "You told me I could get to the hospital by myself," I said again, this time not as a wound, but as a milestone. He looked at me. "And you were right. I could. I did." His eyes dropped to the floor. "But what I learned last night," I continued, "is that being left on your own and choosing to stand on your own aren't the same thing, not even close." I let the words sit. I didn't dress them up or explain what I meant. I didn't have to. For years, I thought strength meant never needing anyone. Then I thought it meant enduring whatever came silently. But I see now, real strength is setting the boundary even when it costs you. Real strength is speaking softly and meaning every word. Real strength is knowing when you've had enough and not needing a breakdown to prove it. He didn't say anything, just nodded, barely. And that was fine. I turned my gaze back toward the window. The snow was thicker now, soft, steady, unapologetic. I didn't feel victorious. This wasn't a win. But I felt awake. And when I looked back at him and saw the way his shoulders curved in and his hands gripped each other to keep still, I didn't feel pity. I felt understanding. This was his moment to carry, his reckoning to sit with. I had my own path now. I didn't end up alone. I chose to stand on my own, and that changed everything.